At first, everyone at the shelter thought it was a miracle. The German Shepherd they rescued just days ago had gone into labor overnight. Staff rushed to help, expecting a litter of tiny, whimpering puppies. But when the vet arrived and took one look inside the whelping box, she froze. Her hands began to shake. These weren't normal puppies, and what lay beside their exhausted mother made her step back in disbelief. The camera footage from that night would later leave millions speechless, because what this dog gave birth to defied every law of nature. Stay till the end. What the vet discovers will leave you with chills. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. Cold wind swept through the empty streets as thunder rolled over the small town. Emily Turner, the night caretaker at Willow Creek Animal Shelter, was about to lock up when she heard it. A faint, broken whimper from outside the gate. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then it came again, desperate and trembling. Grabbing her flashlight, she stepped into the rain, her boots splashing through puddles as the beam of light cut through the darkness. Near the edge of the old factory fence, she saw it, a German Shepherd, soaked, shivering, and barely able to stand. Its ribs showed through its muddy fur, and its eyes. Those eyes looked like they had seen too much pain. Emily's heart clenched. "Hey, girl," she whispered softly, kneeling down. The dog didn't growl or bark. It simply lowered its head as if surrendering. Emily draped her raincoat around the dog and gently lifted her into her truck. As she drove back to the shelter, she noticed the shepherd's belly. Round, heavy, moving slightly. "You're expecting," she murmured. "It's okay. You're safe now." Inside the shelter, Emily dried her off, wrapping her in a warm blanket. The dog didn't resist, just kept her eyes locked on Emily, as though silently pleading for trust. When Emily offered food, she ignored it, her focus fixed on the storm outside. Something about her stillness felt protective. Emily named her Grace, a name that felt right. Something strong, something broken, yet beautiful. As the night deepened, Grace finally lay down in her new kennel, breathing unevenly, her paw resting gently over her swollen belly. Before leaving, Emily whispered through the bars, "Tomorrow we'll take you to the vet. Everything's going to be okay." But as the lightning flashed, Emily caught something strange. Grace's ears twitched sharply, her eyes narrowing toward the window, as if sensing something unseen in the darkness beyond. For the first time, a chill ran down Emily's spine. She couldn't explain why, but something about this rescue felt different. Very different. Morning light filtered through the narrow shelter windows, glinting off the metal kennels. Emily unlocked the main hallway, humming softly as she went through her usual routine. But when she reached Grace's enclosure, she stopped cold. The German Shepherd was already awake, standing perfectly still, her golden brown fur glistening under the light. Her gaze was fixed on something invisible, the corner of the room unmoving, unblinking. "Good morning, girl," Emily said gently, crouching down. Grace didn't wag her tail, didn't blink, didn't even glance toward her food bowl. Her posture was protective, her body curled slightly around her belly. The moment Emily tried to open the kennel door, Grace growled. Not a warning bark, but a deep, guttural sound that sent a shiver through the air. Emily froze. This wasn't aggression. It was fear. She backed away slowly, raising her hands. "It's okay, sweetheart. I won't hurt you." The growl subsided, replaced by a low whine. Grace's eyes softened for a moment, and then she turned her head toward the wall again, ears twitching as if she were listening to something that Emily couldn't hear. Later that morning, when the vet, Dr. Harris, stopped by for checkups, Emily explained Grace's behavior. "She's not violent, just alert," Emily said, almost like she's guarding something. The vet knelt near the kennel and studied her quietly. "She's protective," he said at last. "That's natural. Pregnant dogs get defensive. But there's something in her eyes." He trailed off, uneasy. By afternoon, the shelter dogs began acting restless. They barked toward Grace's kennel, tails stiff, hackles raised. Grace never barked back. She simply stared at them, silent, as if warning them to keep their distance. That night, as Emily closed up, she glanced one last time at Grace. The shepherd was sitting upright now, head lifted, eyes fixed toward the window once again. Outside, the wind howled, and in that fleeting moment, Emily could have sworn she saw Grace's shadow twitch. as if something inside her was moving. Waiting the shelter was quiet that night, too quiet. Most of the dogs had finally settled after hours of restless barking. The hum of the old ceiling fan was the only sound filling the air. Emily sat in the small office, finishing paperwork under the soft glow of a desk lamp. Every so often, she'd glance at the security monitor. Grace's kennel appeared on the middle screen, dark except for a single flickering light bulb above her. Around midnight, a low, uneasy sound came through the hallway. A faint whine followed by slow pacing. Emily looked up at the monitor again. Grace was standing now, moving in circles, her tail low, her ears pricked. Something was wrong. She switched to the live feed and froze. Grace wasn't looking at the door or her food. She was staring directly at the camera. Emily felt a chill crawl up her arms. She got up, grabbed her flashlight, and headed toward the kennels. The lights flickered as thunder rumbled outside. When she reached Grace's enclosure, she noticed fresh paw prints smeared with mud on the concrete, but Emily had cleaned earlier. Grace hadn't moved since then. "Hey, girl," she whispered, peering inside. The shepherd was trembling. Her gaze locked on the shelter window. Her belly moved slightly as if something inside was stirring. Then Grace let out a sound. Not a bark, not a growl, but a deep, mournful cry that made every other dog in the shelter go silent. For a moment, the entire building seemed to hold its breath. The wind howled through a crack in the window, and somewhere in the distance a faint metallic clang echoed, like something had fallen near the back fence. Grace pressed herself against the kennel wall, eyes wide, breathing hard. Emily turned toward the noise, flashlight trembling in her hand. "It's just the storm," she whispered, trying to convince herself. But deep down she knew something had changed in that silence. Something unseen was moving closer, and Grace could feel it first. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world eerily still. A pale gray light poured through the shelter windows, carrying the smell of wet earth. Emily arrived early, clutching her coffee, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling from the night before. When she reached the kennels, she stopped. Grace wasn't lying down anymore. She was pacing, breathing heavily, her sides tightening with each breath. Emily's eyes widened. "Oh no, and it's happening." She called Dr. Harris immediately. "She's going into labor." Within minutes, the small shelter filled with hurried footsteps. The vet and 2 assistants set up a clean area, laying out towels and medical supplies. But as soon as Emily tried to open the kennel gate, Grace growled softly, backing away. Her eyes weren't filled with aggression. They were filled with fear. She didn't want anyone near her. "Let her be," Dr. Harris said quietly. "She wants privacy. We'll observe from a distance." The team dimmed the lights and stepped back. Grace lay down, panting, her paws trembling. Emily knelt outside the kennel, whispering softly, "You're okay, girl. You can do this." Hours passed. The clock ticked slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. The air was heavy with tension. The first cry of a newborn usually brought relief, but not this time. When Grace finally gave birth to the first one, there was no sound. No whimper. No movement. Emily's heart sank. "Dr. Harris?" The vet frowned, watching carefully through the bars. "She's still cleaning it. Give her a moment." Grace licked the small, dark form, nudging it gently. The second followed soon after, then a third, then a fourth. Each one was silent. By the 6th birth, the vet stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "Something's not right," he muttered. Emily tried to look inside, but Grace turned sharply, growling protectively, shielding the newborns with her body. Her eyes gleamed under the dim light, fierce, maternal, and frightened. The shelter fell into hushed silence, broken only by the sound of Grace's heavy breathing. No one dared move closer. Then, as lightning flashed faintly through the window, Emily caught a glimpse. The newborns were not pink or tan like normal puppies. They were completely dark gray, their shapes unnervingly still, and none of them had made a sound. The sun had barely risen when the shelter phone rang again. Emily's trembling hands clutched the receiver. It was Dr. Harris. "Don't touch anything," he said urgently. "I'm on my way." She hadn't planned to. Grace was still curled protectively around her newborns, her eyes flicking up every time someone moved near the kennel. There was no sound, no movement, just a strange, heavy stillness that filled the entire room. When Dr. Harris arrived, he didn't waste a second. "Everyone stay quiet," he whispered, stepping inside with his medical bag. Grace watched him closely but didn't growl this time, only whimpered softly as if asking for help. Slowly, the vet crouched beside the kennel and leaned closer. Then he froze. Emily saw his expression shift, confusion first, then disbelief. He reached out with gloved hands, lifting one of the newborns carefully. "Dear God," he whispered. Emily's stomach dropped. "What is it?" Dr. Harris didn't answer immediately. He examined the tiny creature under the light. Its body was unusually large for a newborn pup, the limbs thicker, the fur dark gray and coarse. But what made his breath catch wasn't its size. It was its silence. Its chest rose and fell in slow, rhythmic movements, but there was no cry, no twitch, nothing resembling a normal puppy's reaction to life. He checked another. Same thing. 6 in total, all alive, all breathing, but eerily calm. No sound, no movement. Just those strange, faintly glowing eyes that flickered open for a second under the light. Emily gasped. "What's wrong with them? I don't know," Dr. Harris said, his voice trembling slightly. "Their vitals are stable, but this isn't natural." Grace shifted slightly, nuzzling one of the newborns closer to her chest, her gaze locked on the vet as if daring him to come any closer. He slowly backed away. "We'll need tests. Blood work, scans, everything." Emily looked at the strange litter, her heart racing. "They don't look like puppies," she whispered. Dr. Harris turned to her, his face pale. "That's because," he said quietly, "I'm not sure they are." By the next morning, whispers had already begun to spread. The shelter's volunteers exchanged uneasy glances as they walked past Grace's kennel. No one said it aloud, but everyone had heard. Something was wrong with her litter. Emily tried to keep calm, but even she could feel the tension crawling under her skin. Grace hadn't moved from her corner. Her body formed a barrier between the newborns and the world, her ears flicking at every sound. Whenever anyone approached, her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting something both protective and primal. Dr. Harris had sealed the medical room, his laptop glowing as he typed notes furiously. The data from the first tests made no sense. The pup's blood readings didn't match any known canine markers. Their heart rhythms were irregular, their temperature unnaturally cold. "These readings are impossible," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "It's like they were engineered." That single word, engineered, was enough to spark panic. A young assistant gasped, and within hours rumors rippled through the town. People online claimed the shelter had discovered a new hybrid species. Others said the dogs were diseased, even dangerous. Reporters called nonstop. Emily stood by the phone, overwhelmed. "Please," she told a journalist, "we don't know anything yet. Stop spreading lies," but it was too late. The story had escaped the shelter walls. Outside, flashing camera lights began appearing at the gate. Grace barked for the first time, a deep, thunderous sound that made everyone step back. The pups stirred slightly beneath her, their faint breaths audible in the silence. Emily knelt down near the cage, voice trembling. "Don't worry, girl. I won't let anyone hurt you." Grace's eyes softened for a moment, but then she looked past Emily toward the window. A black car had stopped across the street. The driver didn't get out. He just watched. Emily's heart skipped. Something told her this story was no longer just about a mother and her strange puppies. Someone, or something, had been waiting for them. The shelter's medical room had never felt so tense. The hum of machines filled the silence as Dr. Harris leaned over the ultrasound monitor, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Emily stood behind him, her arms crossed, anxiety written all over her face. On the screen, the image flickered. One of Grace's newborns lay perfectly still, its heartbeat visible but irregular, pulsing in 2 different rhythms at once. "That can't be right," Emily murmured. Dr. Harris adjusted the settings and scanned another pup. The same result. Double heart patterns. "It's like each of them has 2 circulatory systems," he whispered. He reached for the stethoscope and placed it against the pup's tiny chest. The faint thump was slow, followed by a smaller, faster beat, one layered over the other, almost mechanical. He removed the scope, shaken. "Emily, these aren't deformities. These are modifications." "Modifications?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone interfered, genetically or surgically, but before they were born." Emily's stomach turned. "That's impossible." Grace was a stray. She came from the streets. Maybe, Dr. Harris replied grimly, but strays don't carry DNA with human markers. He turned the monitor toward her, highlighting a strange reading from the sample test. This sequence, it's not found in dogs, or anything I've seen before. Emily took a step back, staring at the gray-furred newborns resting under a warm lamp. They looked peaceful, innocent. Yet there was something unsettling about their stillness. What if they're sick? She asked softly. They're not sick, the vet said. They're designed. Before Emily could respond, Grace suddenly barked, loud, sharp, echoing through the room. The pups stirred for the first time, their tiny bodies twitching as if reacting to her voice. The lights flickered overhead and the heart monitor spiked for every single one of them. Dr. Harris froze, staring at the readings. They're responding to her emotions. Emily knelt beside the kennel, whispering, "It's okay, Grace. We're not going to hurt them." But Grace didn't calm down. Her gaze shifted toward the door, growling low. Dr. Harris followed her eyes while and saw a shadow moving just beyond the glass window. Someone was watching them. That night, the wind carried a strange stillness through Willow Creek. The shelter stood quiet under a sliver of moonlight. The hall's empty except for the faint hum of cameras recording every corner. Emily had insisted on staying overnight after what happened earlier. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching them. The clock read 2:13 a.m. when it began. A soft tapping sound echoed from the far end of the kennel hall. Tap, tap, tap. Emily looked up from her desk, her eyes drifting toward the security monitors. At first, everything seemed normal, until one of the feeds flickered. The image from Grace's kennel distorted, the static forming strange ripples across the screen. Emily leaned closer, heart pounding. In the grainy footage, Grace stood upright, her fur bristling, ears pointed toward the back door. Then, without warning, every other dog in the shelter started barking, feral, terrified barks that echoed through the halls. Emily jumped to her feet, grabbing her flashlight. "Grace?" she called, rushing toward the kennels. As she reached the door, a loud clang rang out from the metal fence outside, followed by a deep guttural growl from Grace's enclosure. The beam of light swept across the kennels. The other dogs pressed themselves against the corners, tails tucked, eyes wide. But Grace wasn't afraid. She was standing tall, teeth bared, staring at the back window. Emily followed her gaze. For a second, just a second, she saw it. A silhouette outside the glass. Tall, unmoving, watching. Then it was gone. Her pulse raced. She locked the door and turned back toward Grace. The newborns were restless now, twitching under the heat lamp. A faint rhythmic humming sound filled the air, coming from their enclosure. It wasn't a growl nor a cry. Something else entirely, something mechanical, almost like an electronic pulse. Emily stumbled back. "Dr. Harris," she whispered, reaching for her phone. But before she could dial, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the pitch-black silence, Grace barked furiously, lunging at the door as the sound of distant footsteps echoed outside the shelter. And then, one by one, the newborns opened their glowing eyes. By sunrise, the storm of chaos had passed, but the shelter felt different now. The power flickered weakly back on, and the dogs, once panicked, lay quiet in their kennels. Only Grace remained alert, her eyes fixed on the door, her newborns nestled tightly against her chest. The faint glow from the night before had faded, leaving behind only stillness. Emily hadn't slept. She sat on the floor beside Grace's enclosure, wrapped in a blanket, watching her breathe. Every instinct told her to be afraid, but she couldn't. The fear that gripped everyone else had turned into something else inside her. Compassion, curiosity, an unexplainable connection. Grace lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting Emily's. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Grace did something unexpected. She inched closer, pressing her nose gently against the metal bars that separated them. Emily froze, heart pounding. Slowly, she extended her hand, letting her fingers rest near the gate. Grace sniffed, then licked them once softly. A wave of relief washed over Emily. "You're not dangerous," she whispered. "You're scared." Over the next few days, she devoted herself to Grace. She hand-fed her, cleaned the kennel, and sat by her side for hours. The other staff tried to keep their distance, whispering about strange readings and glowing eyes, but Emily blocked them out. She felt responsible for Grace and for the innocent lives huddled beside her. Dr. Harris warned her gently. "Emily, we still don't know what they are." "I don't care," she said firmly. "They're alive. That's enough." One evening, as Emily hummed softly, Grace rested her head near the gate, closing her eyes for the first time in days. The pups, sensing calm, made faint sounds, tiny mechanical pulses mixed with weak puppy-like whimpers. It was the first time Emily had heard them. She smiled faintly. "You see? They're just babies." But behind her, through the narrow shelter window, that same black car had returned. The headlights glowed faintly in the fog, waiting, watching. And deep down, Emily knew this peace wouldn't last much longer. The following morning began like any other, quiet, gray, and heavy with the scent of rain. Emily arrived early, carrying fresh blankets and food. Grace greeted her with a soft bark, tail wagging faintly. It was the first real sign of warmth she'd shown since her rescue. For a brief moment, Emily smiled. Maybe things were finally settling down. But as she knelt beside the kennel, her breath caught. Something was wrong. Grace's body was tense, her eyes darting between Emily and the small pile of bedding behind her. Emily frowned and slowly counted the tiny forms nestled there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her heart dropped. There had been 6. "Grace," she whispered, voice trembling. "Where's the other one?" Grace whined softly, nudging the blanket as if trying to search herself. Panic surged through Emily. She checked every corner of the kennel, every towel, every crevice. Nothing. The pup was gone. Dr. Harris arrived moments later after hearing Emily's call. "How could one disappear?" he muttered, scanning the floor for any trace. There were faint muddy paw prints near the back gate, small, irregular, almost human-like in shape. They checked the cameras, but the footage had glitched again. Between 2 and 2:15 a.m., the screen went black. When it returned, Grace was pacing anxiously, one newborn missing from her side. Emily's stomach turned. "Someone took it," she said quietly. "They were watching us last night. They must have come back." Dr. Harris rubbed his forehead. "Or it left on its own." Emily looked at him in disbelief. "They can't even walk yet." But Grace's low growl silenced them both. Her ears perked toward the shelter door, tail stiff, eyes locked on something unseen outside. Emily followed her gaze and saw it. A faint smear of gray fur caught on the doorframe. It shimmered faintly under the light, almost metallic. Her pulse quickened. "What in the world?" she whispered, picking it up. Grace let out a sharp bark, startling everyone. She pressed herself against the bars, eyes wild, as if warning them. Something or someone had crossed that threshold. And whatever had taken the pup was coming back. By afternoon, the shelter was sealed off. The missing pup had turned the place into a scene of tension and whispers. Reporters gathered outside the gate again, their voices muffled through the glass. Inside, Emily sat across from Dr. Harris in the medical room, her hands trembling as he loaded the data from the newborn's scans onto his laptop. "I ran deeper tests," he said, his voice low. "Blood panels, genetic sequences, everything I could." He turned the screen toward her. Rows of coded results flashed by, columns of numbers, patterns that made no sense. "Look here," he pointed. "The DNA structure isn't just canine. There's human genetic material mixed in, and something else I can't identify." Emily's eyes widened. "You're saying they're hybrids?" Dr. Harris exhaled. "I'm saying someone used Grace for experimentation. These newborns, they weren't conceived naturally." Emily felt sick. That can't be. She was just a stray. Who would do something like this? He clicked another file, a microscopic scan of one pup's neck. Embedded just beneath the skin was a small rectangular shape. "We found this under the tissue," he said. "A microchip, but not a normal one. No manufacturer data, no registry. I've never seen anything like it." Emily's breath caught. "So the missing pup..." Dr. Harris nodded grimly. "Someone came back for it." Before Emily could respond, the shelter lights flickered again. A faint beep echoed from the vet's computer. One of the newborn's microchip signals had gone active, pulsing red on the screen. The others followed, blinking in perfect unison. "What's happening?" Emily whispered. Dr. Harris stared at the data. "They're transmitting. But to where?" Suddenly, Grace barked violently from the kennel. Emily rushed out, her heart pounding. Grace was pacing in circles, whining, her gaze darting toward the ceiling, toward the faint hum of a drone hovering just beyond the skylight. Emily's blood turned cold. "They're tracking them," she said, her voice barely audible. Dr. Harris joined her at the window. The drone shifted slightly, its red light blinking before vanishing into the fog. He looked at Emily, fear in his eyes. Whoever created them knows exactly where they are. The rain returned that evening, beating against the shelter windows like an urgent warning. Emily was finishing paperwork when the doorbell rang, a sharp, deliberate sound that made every hair on her arms stand. Grace instantly stiffened in her kennel, letting out a low growl that vibrated through the hall. Emily's instincts told her not to answer, but the knocking came again, harder this time. When she finally opened the door, a tall man in a dark trench coat stood beneath the flickering porch light. His posture was rigid, his eyes cold, almost calculating. "Good evening," he said, flashing a badge. "Dr. Collins, I'm with the National Animal Research Division. We need to collect one of your subjects." Emily blinked. "Subjects?" He stepped inside without waiting for permission, scanning the room with quick, assessing glances. A female German Shepherd recently rescued. And her litter. His tone was calm, but every word carried weight, rehearsed, controlled. Dr. Harris appeared from the back office, frowning. "There's been no authorization for any transfer." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Authorization isn't required when government property is involved." He pulled a folder from his coat and slid it across the counter. Inside were photos, Grace, her pups, and shockingly medical scans that could have only come from Dr. Harris's computer. Emily's blood ran cold. "How did you get these?" "That's classified," the man replied. "But I'll need the mother and remaining pups now." "They're unstable," Grace barked sharply, pressing herself against the kennel bars, teeth bared. Emily stepped in front of her. "You can't take them," she said firmly. "They're not property. They're living beings." The man's eyes hardened. "Miss Turner, you have no idea what you're dealing with." Dr. Harris moved closer, lowering his voice. "If they're unstable, why were they created?" The stranger's jaw tightened. "Because they were never meant to survive outside containment." For a moment, the room went silent, only the rain pounding against the roof. Then Grace growled again, deeper this time, her eyes burning with defiance. Emily met the man's gaze. "Then you'll have to go through me." His expression darkened. "So be it." Outside, engines roared to life. Multiple vehicles pulled up. The shelter was surrounded. The power went out just as the engines outside stopped. Darkness swallowed the shelter, broken only by flashes of lightning through the rain-streaked windows. Emily's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Dr. Harris grabbed a flashlight, his face pale. "They've cut the power," he whispered. Grace began barking furiously, pacing inside her kennel, her pups whining softly beneath her. Emily crouched beside her, unlocking the gate with trembling hands. "We're leaving, girl," she whispered. Grace hesitated for half a second, then nudged her pups close as if she understood. Dr. Harris looked toward the back exit. "There's a maintenance door that leads to the woods," he said. "If we move fast, we might make it." A crash echoed from the front, the sound of boots and shattering glass. "Search every room," a voice commanded. Flashlights swept across the hallway. Emily scooped 2 of the pups into her jacket, while Grace carried another gently in her mouth. Dr. Harris held the remaining 2 inside a blanket. They ran down the narrow corridor, their footsteps splashing through puddles forming on the tile floor. Another crash, this time closer. "Stop right there," someone shouted. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, grazing Emily's shoulder. Grace spun around, growling fiercely, her teeth bared. "Keep going," Emily cried. She pushed open the back door, rain blasting against her face. Cold air rushed in, but freedom waited beyond. Grace bolted through first, vanishing into the storm. Emily followed, clutching the pups to her chest as thunder rolled overhead. Behind them, gunmetal voices barked orders. "Do not harm the subjects, capture only." They stumbled through mud and grass, branches snapping underfoot. The forest loomed ahead, dark and endless. Emily turned back once. The shelter glowed with flashing red lights and chaos. Dr. Harris gasped for breath beside her. "We can't stop now," she said, gripping his arm. "We find cover and keep moving." Grace led the way, her glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like beacons. The pups whimpered softly, huddled against Emily's warmth. And as the storm swallowed their footprints, one truth became clear. This was no longer a rescue. It was a fight for survival. The rain had thinned to a whisper by the time dawn broke over the forest. Emily and Dr. Harris huddled beneath a fallen tree, their breaths visible in the cold morning air. The pups lay bundled inside Emily's jacket, warm and silent. Grace stood nearby, alert, her gaze fixed on the distant sound of engines still combing the main road. "We can't keep running forever," Harris said quietly. His voice was ragged, worn from exhaustion. "They'll track us again." Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the woods. "Then we find out what they want. If we know the truth, maybe we can stop them." They moved carefully, following Grace deeper into the forest. Hours passed before they stumbled upon a rusted chain-link fence half buried in moss. Beyond it stood an abandoned facility. Concrete walls cracked by time, its roof sagging beneath years of decay. Harris frowned. "This place? I've seen it before." Emily pushed through a gap in the fence, heart pounding. Inside, faded logos marked the walls. Project Helix, Division 7. File cabinets lay overturned, papers scattered and soaked. She picked one up. A weathered document labeled Subject G07, Canine Embryo Host Compatibility Trials. Her throat tightened. "Grace!" Harris scanned another folder. "These experiments, they were cross-species studies," he said, horrified. "Splicing animal DNA with engineered cellular sequences. They were trying to create adaptive life forms, hybrids capable of survival under any condition." Emily's stomach twisted. So Grace wasn't rescued from the streets. She escaped. Grace padded forward, sniffing the dusty floor. Then, in the dim light, Emily noticed a metal tag hanging from an old kennel door. G07. Her eyes filled with tears. She was one of them. The pups whimpered softly as if sensing their mother's past. Harris rubbed his temples. Whoever started this program never stopped. The people hunting her, they're trying to reclaim what they created. Emily clenched her fists. "Then we can't let them." Lightning flickered through the broken ceiling, illuminating the faded blueprints spread across the table. Plans for Phase 2. Human integration trials. Emily's heart dropped. "They weren't just making hybrids," she whispered. "They were planning to make something far worse." Grace let out a low growl. Someone was coming. The sun was sinking low behind the forest, painting the sky in shades of amber and fading gold. Emily, Grace, and Dr. Harris had been on the move all day, carrying the newborns through the trees until they finally reached an old farmhouse miles from town. It was quiet there, safe for now. Emily laid the pups gently in a blanket near the fire. Grace immediately curled around them, her breathing steady but tired. Dr. Harris stood by the window, peering out toward the long dirt road that vanished into the horizon. "They'll stop searching soon," he said. "Once they realize we've gone off-grid." Emily nodded, though her eyes stayed on Grace. The German Shepherd looked weaker now, her fur dull, her movements slow. "She's exhausted," Emily whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "She's given everything to protect them," Harris sighed. "She's more than just an experiment, Emily. She's a mother." Night fell softly around them. Emily sat beside Grace, stroking her head. "You're safe now," she murmured. Grace's eyes fluttered open, meeting hers one last time. There was trust there, deep, unspoken, eternal. The same bond that had begun the night she was rescued from the rain. Moments later, Grace lowered her head beside her pups. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. Emily's hands trembled as she pressed her forehead against Grace's fur. "You did it," she whispered through tears. "You saved them." The pups stirred gently, nestling closer to their mother's still body. A faint pulse of light shimmered beneath their fur, brief like the heartbeat of something both fragile and extraordinary. Weeks passed. The world moved on. The media called the story a hoax and the government denied everything. But Emily knew the truth. She and Dr. Harris had moved the pups to a secluded farm on the outskirts of town, far beyond anyone's reach. One morning, she stood by the barn door, watching them play in the tall grass, and stronger, healthier, growing fast. They looked almost normal now, almost. But when they turned toward her, their eyes gleamed faintly gold. Grace's eyes, Dr. Harris joined her quietly. You ever think she knew what she was? Emily smiled sadly. She didn't need to. She just knew she was their protector. As the wind rustled the trees, one of the pups paused and looked toward the sky, ears twitching. Alert, loyal, fearless, Emily whispered. You're safe now, Grace. Your legacy lives on. And somewhere in the distance, carried by the evening breeze, came the faint echo of a bark, strong, proud, and free,